Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, says war crimes have been committed by both Israel and Hamas in the conflict that erupted just over a month ago. Mr. Turk says the atrocities perpetrated by Hamas are heinous and are war crimes, so also is the collective punishment by Israel of Palestinian civilians. He adds that there are three human rights imperatives: the delivery of sufficient humanitarian aid to Gaza, the release of hostages, and to implement a durable end to the conflict. He made these comments at the Rafah border crossing, which is closed today. That's the entry from Gaza into Egypt. However, the Israeli military has reopened an evacuation road that allows civilians to move from northern Gaza to the south.
Rafah crossing has been the symbolic lifeline for the last month for the 2.3 million in Gaza. The lifeline has been unjustly, outrageously thin. These are the gates to a living nightmare. A nightmare where people have been suffocating under persistent bombardment, mourning their families, struggling for water, for food, for electricity and fuel. On the other side of this gate is Gaza, already described as the world's biggest open-air prison before 7 October, under a 56-year occupation and a 16-year blockade by Israel. The atrocities perpetrated by Palestinian armed groups on the 7th of October were heinous. They were war crimes, as is the continued holding of hostages. The collective punishment by Israel of Palestinian civilians is also a war crime, as is unlawful, forcible evacuation of civilians.
Meanwhile, far away in Paris, France, some 80 countries and international organizations are meeting to coordinate aid and assess how to help the wounded in the Palestinian enclave of Gaza. The Palestinian Authority's Prime Minister is present at the conference, but Israel was not invited. French officials say Israel is being kept informed of developments. The conference brings together regional stakeholders such as Egypt, Jordan, and the Gulf Arab countries, as well as Western powers and G20 members, except for Russia. International institutions and non-governmental organizations operating in Gaza, such as Doctors Without Borders, are also present. Host President Emmanuel Macron says there must be a humanitarian pause very quickly in Gaza and that countries must also work for a ceasefire. He also announced increased aid for Palestinians from 20 million euros to 100 million euros in 2023. For the Commissioner General of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, Philippe Lazzarini, he is concerned about the spillover risk of the situation in Gaza, adding that the West Bank is boiling.
I'm deeply concerned about the potential spillover of the conflict beyond the Gaza. In the West Bank, military incursion by the Israeli forces and settler violence have caused record high death toll among Palestinians. The West Bank is boiling, and if we wouldn't have Gaza today, all our attention would be on the West Bank. We need a meaningful and continuous flow of humanitarian aid, including fuel. The volume of aid coming in through Rafah blatantly is inadequate. All crossings should be open, in particular crossing points with Israel like Kerem Shalom. But humanitarian aid alone will not cover the needs of people in Gaza. It must be complemented by the private sector and the restoration of municipal services like water and waste management.
And the UN Chief Martin Griffiths is also in attendance at the Paris conference. He says the conflict in Gaza is a wildfire that could spread across the region, adding that allowing the situation to continue in the enclave will be a travesty. At the start of the humanitarian conference on Gaza, Mr. Griffiths said that the United Nations cannot be part of unilateral proposal to push Palestinians into so-called safe zones, referring to Israel's evacuation order for people in Gaza to move from north to south. The Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council, Jan Egeland, also called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Meanwhile, the White House says more than 80 humanitarian trucks have entered Gaza in the past 24 hours, and roughly 500 to 600 Americans are yet to get out of the enclave. Thousands of Palestinian civilians continue trudging in a procession out of the north of Gaza, seeking refuge from Israeli airstrikes and fierce ground fighting between Israeli troops and Hamas. Earlier today, Israel opened the road for 6 hours only for the Palestinian people to move.
Just a brief update on the crossing at Rafah. Over the last 24 hours, more than 80 more trucks carrying humanitarian aid was able to enter Gaza. That brings the total to 650. Again, not enough. We're going to continue to work to push that. And as of now, we're aware of more than 400 Americans and family members who have been able to depart and sought the support of our embassy team on the ground in Egypt. There has been no change in that number since yesterday. So no more U.S. citizens or family members got out since the last time, well, since yesterday when I was up here talking to you guys. Prime Minister Netanyahu talked about an indefinite period where they would be on the ground. I think he was referring to the fact that in the immediate aftermath of conflict, it's certainly plausible that for at least some period of time, Israeli Defense Forces are still going to be in Gaza to manage the immediate aftermath and the security situation. But that nothing's changed about our view that that shouldn't be the long-term solution, that it shouldn't be about an IDF reoccupation of Gaza as a long-term governance solution. Certainly the American citizens that we know are being held, but all of them. And in order to do that, as we saw with the first 4 that got out, 2 Americans and then 2 Israelis a couple of days later, there was enough of a pause in the fighting to allow for their safe passage, and that's what we're trying to get cemented, is an agreement for as many pauses as might be necessary to get all of them out. But it's a delicate negotiating process, and we're still working at it. What I can tell you is that we want to stay open to the idea that it might take, in fact, likely could take, more than one humanitarian pause to get them all out.
In the meantime, the Israeli army has released a video of what it says is the location of tunnels in Gaza used by Hamas. The footage posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, showed excavators digging up earth to reveal structures underground. The army claims it has destroyed the said tunnels. In another video, soldiers are inspecting holes in the ground with a caption reading, "Locating underground infrastructure and resources in the Gaza Strip." A soldier pointed downwards while saying this is what the enemy uses to circulate air underground. And more on the fighting now. Israel's military spokesperson, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, says Hamas has lost control of northern Gaza as thousands of residents have moved south. In his words, the IDF saw 50,000 Gazans move from the northern Gaza Strip to the south. They are moving because they understand that Hamas has lost control and is continuing to lose control in the north. The Rear Admiral was speaking in a televised briefing, adding that there would be no ceasefire, but Israel has been allowing for humanitarian pauses at the specific times to give residents an opportunity to relocate. And Britain's government has escalated its row with London's police chief over the handling of a pro-Palestinian march this weekend, accusing its officers of taking a softer stance towards left-wing causes. Plans for a demonstration in London on Saturday's Armistice Day have sparked a row between government and police, with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak saying he would hold the force accountable for any trouble after it said there was not enough reason to ban it. London has been the venue for some of the biggest demonstrations in Europe since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7, with tens of thousands of marchers gathering each weekend to demand an end to Israel's retaliatory bombing of Gaza. Police say they expect a significant demonstration on Saturday, November 11, the anniversary of the end of World War I, but there are no plans for protests on November 12, when formal Remembrance Sunday events are held. in central London. Mr. Sunak has called the march disrespectful, but Police Commissioner Mark Rowley has said that any ban would require intelligence of a threat of serious disorder, that such bans had not been implemented for a decade.
Yeah, this is a decision that the Metropolitan Police Commissioner has made, and he has said that he can ensure that he safeguards remembrance for the country this weekend, as well as keep the public safe. Now, my job is to hold him accountable for that, and we've asked the police for information on how they will ensure that this happens.
The remembrance events will not be disturbed. Whatever protests and other events go on, we will do our utmost to protect those because they are so critical. People shouldn't be in fear that those are going to be compromised. We will do everything possible to make sure they're not. The second point about protest, though, there will be a protest this weekend. Parliament's very clear about that. The law provides no mechanism to ban a gathering, a static protest, a rally, anything like that. There's no mechanism whatsoever to ban such a thing. And if the organisers want that, then it will happen.
A Canadian-Palestinian man in Gaza has described living among the devastation and Israeli strikes, saying war crimes are being committed. Mansour Shuman, who has lived in Gaza City for 2 years but has taken shelter in Khan Yunis in the north and south of the territory, said religious buildings, cultural sites and hospitals had been hit by strikes. A father of 5, he worries the war will have a deep psychological impact on the children of Gaza, while it may force others to give up a normal, peaceful life and resist. Mr. Shuman's wife and children have left Gaza to Egypt, but he has decided to stay to assist where possible, despite being eligible to leave as he holds Canadian citizenship.
Hospitals have been bombed, schools, refugee centers, churches, mosques, cultural centers, gyms, people in ambulances, over 47 journalists killed, some of them with their families. I mean, war crimes are happening here. Now it's hour by hour. A few minutes ago, an airstrike hit a building just beside the hospital, damaging the radiology department of the hospital, right? No one was expecting that. 4 mosques were bombed to the ground today in Khan Yunis, supposedly the safe area. Hundreds of years of history down the drain, killing many, injuring many. No one expected that. People expected to go to pray and come back home. So uncertainty, definitely. Yesterday, my name, together with my wife and my 5 kids, were one of 80 Canadians, plus several other nationalities who were on the approved list to leave Gaza to Egypt. This decision was made many days back. It wasn't a sudden decision. It was after I had a discussion with my family at large. Look, we are at a historic turn point, I believe, not only in Palestine or in the region, but in the world. And I think what's happening in Gaza will have repercussions for many years and decades to come. And I think it's children being orphaned, women being widowed, neighborhoods being destroyed, bombarded, neighborhoods, full neighborhoods down to the ground. I think mentally this will affect thousands of children for many generations to come. I think it's forcing people who weren't thinking about resisting to now consider being part of the resistance, right? People who wanted to live like a normal, peaceful life, but when you take everything from them, now they're like, okay, I have to do something, right?
Well, today marks the 85th anniversary of the November pogrom for Germans. And for the relatives of Israeli-German hostages kidnapped by Hamas, it's a double devastation. They're repeating their plea for the governments to take action to secure the release of their loved ones 85 years after a pogrom against Jews was carried out by the Nazis. Ronnie Roman, whose sister has been missing since Hamas attack on October 7, said that the most scary part is that people were getting used to the fact that 240 people have been kept underground for a month. Leonor Natanzon, whose grandmother has survived the Holocaust but died last January at the age of 99, said that she is happy that she was not there to witness all this. Natanzon's sister, Doran, was visiting their mother, Efrat, with her daughters, Raz and Aviv, at kibbutz near the Gaza border when Hamas attacked. They were all kidnapped, including Efrat, who is presumed dead, Leon Natanzon's brother, Ravid, and her mother's boyfriend, Gadi, are also missing.
This is part of my family. This is my sister and my two nieces, Raz and Aviv. Raz is 4.5 years old, and Aviv is 2.5 years old. And this is my brother, Aviv. On Saturday morning, we woke up hearing the sirens. I was not in the kibbutz. I was spending the holiday with my husband's family in the center of Israel. And we kept on talking to them, texting them, talking on the phone, until we got no sign of them. It wasn't about 10:30 a.m. when my sister wrote me the last message.
This is the night, this is actually the morning or tomorrow that my grandmother left Germany, and this is also very moving to be here today. So it's hard, but we're here to remember, so it won't happen again, and so my sister will be back home safe. So I think the first thing is not letting anyone forget. I think this is also the most scary part for me, that people just get used to that there is 240 hostages underground maybe for 1 month, and people just look at it like it's normal, but it's not. It's crucial. They're treating like animals. They took her barefoot, and it didn't happen. It's not something that happened on the 7th of October. My family is still under attack, and this is why I'm here to spread this story again and again, because this is my life right now. And I'm here to ask anyone that every morning will remember my sister and to do something even small to bring her back, and also the government to speak about this issue every conversation, and at work conversation and at media conversations, and to put the pressure and to find the right deal, the humanitarian deal for my sister that held hostage, and also for the hostages, the Palestinian civilians, Gaza hostages. They're also hostages of the Hamas. Both of us right now hostages, and the liberal world should find a solution.
Well, the past few weeks have seen a pattern of escalation of attacks on critical infrastructure, including attacks on energy infrastructure across Ukraine. The impact of these attacks on the lives of civilians is of particular concern, especially at the onset of the winter period. This is according to a top UN official, Miroslav Jenka, Assistant Secretary General for Europe, Central Asia and Americas. He was briefing the UN Security Council on the situation in Ukraine. He says as the war continues without any end in sight, there's particular concern about the continued near daily attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure throughout Ukraine by Russia. According to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, 9,933 have been killed and 18,302 injured since February 2022.
As the war continues without an end in sight, we remain particularly concerned about the continued near daily attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure throughout Ukraine. According to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, 9,933 have been killed and 18,302 injured since February last year. The actual figures are likely considerably higher, as many reports from areas with ongoing hostilities are still pending corroboration. Tragically, attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure have continued. Communities near the front lines in the Kharkiv, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk and Luhansk regions of Ukraine remain under constant shelling. The past few weeks have seen a pattern of escalation of attacks on critical infrastructure, including attacks on energy infrastructure across the country. The impact of these attacks on the lives of civilians is of particular concern, especially at the onset of the winter period.
But no matter how hard it tries, Russia cannot escape from the fact that it bears the ultimate responsibility for the unfortunate and unnecessary loss of life as a result of its war of choice.
As it happened yesterday in the occupied Ukrainian city of Donetsk, where the so-called Vladimir Zhoga Republican Center of Unmanned Systems was destroyed by high-precision strike. It was a military training facility used by the occupation forces to train combat UAV operators and assemble kamikaze drones.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin is in Kazakhstan as he met with President Kassym Tokayev. The Kazakh leader praised relations between the countries as they met in Astana. Mr. Putin's third known trip abroad since the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant in March for the Russian leader on war crime charges. Kazakhstan, like China and Kyrgyzstan, the two other countries Mr. Putin has visited recently, is not a signatory to the ICC. The ICC, which accused Mr. Putin of illegally deporting children from Ukraine, obliges the court's 123 member states to arrest Mr. Putin and transfer him to The Hague for trial if he sets foot on their territory. Kazakhstan's president, a career diplomat, has carefully maintained neutrality in the Russia-West standoff and welcomed Mr. Putin just a week after hosting French President Emmanuel Macron. A United States delegation led by a senior State Department official also visited Astana this week. And 5 candidates seeking to halt former U.S. President Donald Trump's march towards the 2024 Republican presidential nomination have gathered in Miami for the party's third debate. The former president held a separate campaign rally across town. Mr. Trump skipped the debate between South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, and former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. Amid swipes at one another, the Trump rivals pledged to back Israel in its war against Hamas.
Telling Bibi, finish the job once and for all with these butchers, Hamas. They're terrorists. They're massacring innocent people. They would wipe every Jew off the globe if they could.
We need to be clear-eyed. The last thing we need to do is to tell Israel what to do. The only thing we should be doing is supporting them and eliminating Hamas.
The founding vision of Israel was based on the idea that they don't want to depend on anybody else's sympathy or direction in defending themselves. So what I would tell Bibi is that Israel has the right and the responsibility to defend itself.
I would tell President Biden with great clarity, if you want to stop the 40+ attacks on military personnel in the Middle East, you have to strike in Iran.
Israel and their intelligence community failed. They failed here, and they failed the people of the state of Israel. And so we need to work closely and better together to make sure, one, that they're degraded, and two, that we know everything that's going on inside the Gaza Strip when it's going on so that something like this can't happen.
Maria Bird joins us now, our Channels TV correspondent in Washington, D.C. Hi, Maria.
Good evening.
Right, so where do we begin? We have the debate to President Trump's rally in Miami and the testimony of Ivanka Trump at her father's civil fraud case. Which of these is gaining much attention in the U.S.?
I think it's hard to say. We have so much going on, as you've mentioned. The rally, I think, definitely was what the former president was hopeful would take the attention over the debate. But we know that the civil trial in New York has definitely been on the tops of the minds of both Democrats and Republicans as it's coming to a close. And looking at his daughter having to testify when she did not want to testify, she was hopeful she would not have been called to the stand. But as we know, she was called to the stand this week to provide clarity and her involvement in some of what they're claiming to be inflaming results of the financial statements of the Trump organization.
And talk to us more about the third Republican debate held yesterday. Former U.S. President Donald Trump absent yet again.
Yes, you are correct. He's absent once again, and he is almost looking at himself as the sole individual that will definitely secure the votes. He has, as we know, he's held this large rally almost in competition with the debate. He has continued to be the front runner despite all of the issues that we've seen that surround him, all the legal cases that surround him. But he continues to have thousands upon thousands of people coming out to support him at his rallies, and also showing the polls that he is still the front runner.
And how serious should we take the polls that still put Donald Trump as the overwhelming Republican front runner? We know the White House says we should just take it as a grain of salt.
Yes, and the president has spoken out in that area. His campaign managers have spoken out to say that these polls are not what we can necessarily take seriously. I think that that is also what the other Republican candidates are taking to heart and are believing that they must show their value, that they are in this race, because we don't know what could end up happening with some of these civil cases and other cases that are surrounding the former president. And we don't know what his eligibility will be once we get to election time. So I think they are hopeful that they'll be able to rise up to the top. As we know, last night, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, and also Ron DeSantis were sparring back and forth. And they are hopefully what they believe will continue to be sparring back and forth. And hopefully they will find great support from the Republican Party in trying to gain that support from those Trump supporters and also those supporters of the Republican Party.
And to the civil fraud case in New York, you just spoke a few minutes ago about how Ivanka Trump, was not really willing to testify, against her father. But what do we expect next, going forward? Are we close to a verdict at this time?
They are expecting that the verdict will come out, that she was the closing out of the testimonies, and those who be called to the witness stand. We know that she also was very clear that she had very little involvement in the financial dealings, the personal financial dealings of her father, and did not know much of those, but also focused in on the Trump message, as the former president and his son reiterated during their testimonies that the Trump organization over-delivered, that they did not inflate the value of the organization. So I think she stuck true to that messaging, but also focused in on the lack of understanding or knowledge that she had as it relates to the personal finances.
Right, Maria, should the former president be worried? I know he was absent at the debate for, he was out campaigning and doing other things. But should he be worried about the possible verdict here? Could it potentially damage his race to the White House for a second time?
I don't think he is concerned. I think we've seen where he has continued despite. But I think that there could be some level of concern that he has because of the ramifications of what this could mean. So if the verdict came out or he was convicted, what does that mean from a sentencing perspective? And that's where the concern comes if he was to be convicted.
Right, Maria, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
So let's move on. President of the military-ruled Myanmar says the country is at risk of breaking apart due to ineffective management of recent violence in its border regions with China. The junta is facing the biggest challenge to its authorities since it gained power in a 2021 coup with attacks by revolutionary and ethnic armed forces on hundreds of junta bases in the north, northeast, northwest, and southeast of the country. In the northeast, the junta has also lost control of some border trade towns with China. The Chinese government also confirmed this week that there had been Chinese casualties due to military ordnance going over the border. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu is in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where he's joining other world leaders for the Saudi-Africa Summit, scheduled to take place on November 10, 2023. President Tinubu is expected to underscore Nigeria's commitment to attracting more foreign direct investment and expanding business partnerships, which are strongly reinforced by his administration's ongoing domestic economic reforms. In a statement, the presidency explained that discussions at the first Saudi-Africa summit will revolve around supporting joint action, enhancing political coordination, addressing regional security threats, facilitating economic transformation through research and the local development of new energy solutions, while bolstering cross-sectoral investment cooperation. The president is accompanied by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yusuf Tuggar, Minister of Education, Professor Tahir Maman, and the Coordinating Minister of the Economy and Minister of Finance, Mr. Wali Edun, among other top government officials. Over in Mali, where the United Nations spokesperson for the Secretary General, Stefan Dujarric, has been speaking about the latest attacks on UN peacekeeping convoys, the United Nations says there have now been 6 attacks since the peacekeepers left their base in northern Kidal in Mali on October 31. Mr. Dujarric noted that 37 peacekeepers who were injured in the explosives are now in stable condition.
As we reported last week, the convoy traveled nearly 350 kilometers, encountered 6 improvised explosive devices along the way. A total of 37 peacekeepers required medical attention, and all, thank God, have been discharged or in stable condition. 143 vehicles carrying 848 peacekeepers made up the convoy, and those peacekeepers came from Bangladesh, Chad, Egypt, Guinea, and Nepal, as well as the equipment represented the final elements of MINUSMA's accelerated withdrawal from Kidal due to the deteriorating situation. We were told that the convoy was approximately 9 kilometers in length, so you can imagine the challenges. The convoy also had to depart without air support due to the lack of flight clearance from the relevant authorities in Mali, and that, of course, increased the threat to the safety of the peacekeepers. In addition to insecurity, bad weather and poor road conditions caused vehicles to break down, adding to the challenges the convoy faced on its way to Gao.
To a tragic development in South Africa, where a woman met her untimely death just moments before she was due to take stand to testify in court. The yet unidentified woman was reportedly gunned down outside Randburg Court in South Africa. According to local media, she was due to testify against a police officer who was accused of torture. A car pulled up as she was approaching the courthouse before she was shot dead, along with a man who was also a state witness in the case. Authorities are, however, investigating the incident, as the motive for the murder is still unknown. The International Criminal Court opened an investigation in March 2011 focused on alleged crimes against humanity committed in Libya since the 15th of February 2011. Briefing the United Nations Security Council on the situation, the prosecutor of the ICC, Karim Khan, says over 4,000 evidence has been collected during the probe. Mr. Khan noted that video evidence, audio material, as well as satellite imagery have been presented during the investigation period and are expected them to be completed by the end of 2025.
We have continued to accelerate our investigative activities. The team has undertaken in this reporting period over 15 missions in 3 regions, collecting over 4,000 items of evidence. This includes video evidence, audio material, forensic information, satellite imagery, as well as conducting numerous witness screenings and witnessed interviews. I am of the view that the results of this new strategic approach are significant and are clearly discernible. But as we continue to build on this momentum, it is critical that my office continues to proactively and meaningfully engage with this Council, with the government of Libya, and of course with survivors, to begin to chart a path that leads to the successful completion of our investigative activities in relation to the situation as a whole.
And as war in neighboring Sudan shifts beef importers' focus to Chad, the bustling cutting room of Laham, Chad, looks set to fulfill the country's ambitious attempt to transcend from being a live cattle trader to an African meat export heavyweight. Arise Integrated Industrial Platforms, a pan-African venture, plans to invest over 330 million euros to make this happen.
It's a state-of-the-art meat processing facility outside the town of Mundu in Chad's rural south. Smartly attired staff are hard at work carving the livestock. Laham Chad's assistant quality manager, Ashkeb Rajoria, believes this is the beginning of the transformation of how livestock is sold and ultimately the entire nation's economic trajectory.
Before Chad, they are not following any food safety here. They are used to slaughter animal on the street. This is very unhygienic and very dangerous to their health also. Now we have set up a proper unit where we can put every food safety norms, and we are ensuring that our product is 100% safe as per the microbial contamination, as per the human consumption. And we are giving the best premium quality as we can give in whole Chad.
Arise Integrated Industrial Platforms, AIIP, a pan-African venture partly owned by the Africa Finance Corporation, plans to invest over 330 million euros to create 7 specialized industrial zones powered by dedicated electric plants to facilitate the processing of livestock into meat for export. Laham Chad, owned 65% by AIIP and 35% by the Chadian state, is at the center of that plan, where beyond the slaughterhouse and refrigeration facilities, investors are working to build the country's first livestock quarantine zone and fattening farm. With an estimated 110 million head of cattle, the livestock sector is a cornerstone of Chad's economy, second only to oil in revenue, contributing 30% to the GDP and supporting nearly 40% of the population, and that's according to World Bank figures. Chad exports over 1 million cattle and as many small ruminants annually. But traditionally, these animals are transported live, limiting outflows and posing risks to herdsmen who often pass through conflict zones to reach their destinations. The transition to processed meat exports is complex, however, in a nation where wealth is measured by herd size and pastoralism does not yield standardized livestock. Sourcing ideal weight and vaccinated animals remains a challenge, as does competing with cheaper exporters in industrialized countries. But National Partnership Director Abdul Razak Arabi believes Chad's pastoralist approach to cattle breeding gives it a unique advantage on the international stage. Breeders like Ali are enthusiastic, believing the strategic pivot toward processed meat exports could reshape Chad's economic landscape, generating revenue and creating jobs while maintaining the pastoral practices that define its livestock industry.
We are already seeing that the demand from slaughterhouses has increased in terms of the number of cattle to be supplied daily. We are able to supply as many cattle as they require.
Currently, we are running on the low capacity, but we are planning to set up more units because demand is high. So to cope up with the demand, we are opening new plants in Chad and Jamena also, so we can cope up with the demand.
Targeting markets like Gabon, Egypt, and Nigeria, Laham Chad began exporting frozen meat to Gabon via refrigerated trucks in June. The company aims to process and export 200 cattle and 400 small animals daily, competing against Indian, Argentine, and Brazilian meats.
We head to New Delhi in India, which is still covered in toxic smog, with shops selling air purifying plants and appliances seeing higher sales as residents look for ways to cope. Delhi's air quality index was put at 457 on Thursday. An AQI of 0 to 50 is considered good, while a reading above 100 is termed unhealthy for those with pulmonary issues. Anything between 301 to 500 is considered hazardous. New Delhi plans for the first time to induce rain to try to improve air quality. It's the world's most populated capital, and seasonal smog has gripped it for a week. The city has already shut all schools, stopped construction activities, and said it will impose restrictions on vehicle use. For school children who can't go to physical schools, they have been attending online classes at home and spend all day indoors due to worsening air pollution. Their mother says the family, one of the families affected, said they are considering relocating to northwestern Indian city of Udaipur, known for its lakes and palaces, where one of the women's husband has businesses if the conditions don't improve by next year. U.S. actors are expected to resume work after their union agreed a tentative deal with Hollywood studios to end a 4-month strike. The unions reached agreements with the Alliance of Motion Picture and TV Producers in a unanimous vote. The shutdown, combined with a separate writers' strike, paralyzed the entertainment industry and disrupted numerous major films and TV shows. Actors have been calling for better pay and safeguards on the use of AI.
Because we threw it down, we put in a good fight, and we proved what it takes when we come together with labor. Let's go!
In the meantime, the chief negotiator, Duncan Crabtree Island, has been speaking on the details of the agreement between the Hollywood actors and producers. He says this is something that's going to make a difference, not just during the term of the contract, but it's going to make a long-term difference for the future of the industry. Valued at more than $1 billion, the new three-year contract includes increases in minimum salaries and a new streaming participation bonus. The deal also provides protections against unauthorized use of images generated by artificial intelligence, an area that had emerged as a major concern from performers who feared being replaced by digital doubles.
I feel great that we have, after 118 days on strike and 35 days of negotiation before that, reached a deal. And I think our members are really excited as well, as are, I think, all of the other workers in the industry who, of course, are ready to be back to work. Looking in the wrong place.
Great. Thank you so very much. Appreciate you.
Don.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is that okay? Do you want me? I can give her one instead.
No, I made it. So to take.
Well, I think our last issue that we were hung up on was an AI-related issue, and we finally were able, through discussions with the AMPTP and studio folks and our own members, we were able to make a breakthrough that gave the committee the confidence to sign off on the terms of that AI deal and bring the entire agreement to me. I think these processes naturally lend themselves to sort of intense moments, and there were some intense moments between all of us at various points. But in the end, I think we all recognize that the industry needs to get back to work. it could only happen with a deal that's fair. And ultimately, we needed to get on the same page. The overall valuation of these contract gains is over $1 billion during the term of this contract. That's by far the largest set of gains we've ever achieved in a contract negotiation. And there's really important protections built into this contract around things such as artificial intelligence protections, and also including making sure that now there is a stream of revenue coming off of the streaming business that can actually sustain middle-class actors who are trying to make a career in streaming.
And the next images you're about to see is not one you see every day. Talking about the British Princess of Wales, Catherine, in her army camouflage as Colonel-in-Chief to the Queen's Dragoon Guards. Now, she visited the Guards for the first time since she was appointed Colonel-in-Chief of the regiment by King Charles in August. Dressed in full camouflage gear, Princess Kate rode in an armored vehicle and learned to fly a reconnaissance drone at the Robertson Barracks in Swanton Morley, Norfolk. She also met with families of personnel and promoted the regimental mascot pony trooper Longface Emery's Jones from Lance Corporal to Corporal. Cute. Well, a 1932 Pablo Picasso masterpiece is sold for $139 million, the second highest price ever achieved for the artist, according to Sotheby's. Femme à la montre, a woman with a watch, also becomes the most valuable work sold at the auction this year. It depicts Marie-Therese Walter, the French model, who was also a lover of the Spanish artist and the subject of many of his paintings. The work had been valued at $120 million before it went to auction. It was previously owned by the late art collector Emily Fisher Landau, who bought it in 1968 and has been purchased by an anonymous buyer. Femme à la montre is a portrait of Walter seated in a throne-like chair against a blue background.
At $110 million. On my right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to Sotheby's here in New York. Pablo Picasso, Femme à la montre, an absolute tour de force from his 1932 Year of Wonders, and a masterpiece by every measure. Full of confidence, intensely vibrant, and brilliantly composed, this exceptional painting hung in pride of place over Emily Fisher Landau's mantelpiece. Tonight, it will find a new home. And I want to start the bidding here at $95 million, at $95 million. At $95 million, at 95, $100 million now, at $100 million, at $100 million, $105 million, at $105 million, at $105 million, $110 million. It's with you, Gregoire, at $110 million now, at $110 million. On my right here. $115 million. It's in a new place now with Wendy Lynn here. $115 million. Thank you, Wendy. $115 million. It's your bid. $115 million. At $115 million. Here it is. On my left, at $115 million. And against you, Greg, at $115 million. Still with you, Wendy, now. $115 million. $120 million. Thank you, Gregoire. At $120 million. Here on this side of the room at $120 million. At $120 million. You're going to come in here at $120 million. It's still with you, Gregoire, at $120 million now. At $120 million. At $120 million. Still with you, Greg, at $120. That's against you, Brooke, at $120 million here. You're bidding there at $120. $120 million, still on my right at 120. It's with you, Gregoire, at 120 for the moment, at 1,020,000. At 120 million, there it is, at 120. Wendy. Let's try another one, at 120 million. At $120 million, here it is, at 120. With Gregoire Beer, $121 million, thank you very much indeed. in another new place at 121. Brooke Lampley. Thank you, Brooke, at 121 million. Now, at $121 million for the Marie-Thérèse, the Femme à la Mode from 1932, here at Sotheby's, at $121 million. I'm selling the picture. Fair warning, last chance, for $121 million. Brooke, it's yours. Thank you very much. Panel number 36, thank you. Alexander Calder and Joseph Albers to Georgia.
Wow, I'm wowed. Well, that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jackie Rogers. Bye for now.